trigger, otherwise known as the dog. You'll simply press this jaw down, place the dog over that jaw, and lift up on the pan. Now do not release this pan, keep pressure underneath of it and get your hands out of the way to where you will not end up caught in this long spring trap. While holding up on the pan, release tension off of the setter, come back, open the setter, and carefully remove your long spring. Now this trap still is not in an effective way to catch any animal of any type because of this jaw that's still in place. With your finger on the back side of the jaw, again, so you do not get caught, should the trap fire accidentally, lower this jaw. Sometimes you got to move and flex your long springs around. Move this jaw down to the back. We can adjust the tension on this pan because the animal will essentially have to step onto this pan to fire the trap. Slowly lower the pan down until it's set at the appropriate tension and level to where, with the least bit of pressure, this animal, when stepping on this pan, will make the trap fire. And we can set the trap off safely and carefully by again going underneath the jaws and simply applying pressure to that pan. Alright, next up from the long spring is what we like to refer to as the coil spring, a leg hold trap. This is sort of the next evolution up from the long spring. A little bit more technology involved in this trap and a whole lot easier to set for these. I personally don't require setters for these. I can set these on my own without another piece of equipment, but they do make setters that will go off and extend these arms on each side to where they can be compressed very easily by hand. Otherwise, you will have to set them using your feet. A little bit of difference in these two traps that's important to note is this is a particularly large coil spring, probably larger than what most folks are used to seeing. I like to use a large, and this is a number 5, a large coil spring for beavers. They have particularly large back feet especially. Their front feet are still pretty small, but for those folks that like to do a rear foot beaver catch, you're going to have a large trap with a large jaw length and a good bit of space in here to hold that beaver high up on his ankle and create the least pain possible and be the most effective as possible. Here's the coil spring, and I'll back up a little bit here too. This is a coil spring trap that has 4 springs on it. There's a lot of holding power here. It's a very fast trap, very effective. We'll move on here to this is just a little 2 coil spring trap, and this is a 1 3/4 trap. This is a lot smaller. It's a lot more effective for, say, raccoons, coyotes, fox, and things like that. This really has no place in the beaver swamp or in the beaver pond. It's simply too small to be effective and ethical for beaver trapping. So we'll back up here and we'll go ahead and set this number 5 coil spring trap. With these, I simply take a grip on the jaws here, put one foot on the left lever, compress it, lift up, put my other foot on the right lever, compress it, and right now there's no longer tension on these catch arms. We'll again flip our trigger and our dog back by holding the lever closest to the dog. We'll push it down, lift the dog up, and all the time our fingers are clear of the jaws, and my other hand is working underneath this other catch jaw. I now compress this dog just slightly and lift the pan high up and over the dog. It's now taking pressure off that far catch jaw. Now, since we have the dog securely in place, pan is up high, take your rear jaw, set it all the way back, and again we can come down and adjust our pan pressure. And now as that beaver would step on that pan with either his front or his rear foot, he can be caught. And again we can set it off by reaching underneath this back jaw and compressing the pan. Okay, so when it comes to leg holds, whether it be a long spring or a coil spring trap, I really don't recommend that they be set on land to where the beaver has to be trapped and waited until you get there in the morning to dispatch him. I'd much rather see the leg holds set on what we call a drowning cable or a drown slide set. And it goes a little bit like this. We'll take the same four coil spring that we talked about earlier, and we'll dissect it a little bit here. And here's where the quick links come in that we talked about earlier for the necessities of a trapping bucket. This quick link is attached and linked through our crunch-proof swivels, and we've got a swivel at the base of this leg hold and at the end of the leg hold. This helps to where that beaver, when caught, can swivel and turn easily without being caught up, twisting an ankle or breaking skin, and making it as painless and ethical as possible. So what we'll do is we'll open up our quick link, and on this cable we have what's known as a drowning lock. On that drowning lock there is an opening to where this quick link can be attached. Simply slide your quick link through that cable and always be sure to lock back that quick link all the way to the end as tight as possible. It's not a bad idea to take a wrench and get another good half twist on there to make sure that quick link does not come open. So when this leg hold is on this drown cable, it's embedded and set and ready for a beaver to step in it near the shoreline where the beaver would come up to exit the water body. That beaver will step in this trap. It will close on whether it be his front or his rear leg, and their natural instinct is to come back the way they came and to dive to deep water. So what will happen, you've got a loop here, it will be staked in the shoreline. Beaver's caught, he will dive freely, and that lock will allow him to slide all the way to the bottom of this drown cable. And you can see just how easy it can go this way. And he'll come down here and hit our anchor. This anchor has got to be set 3 feet deep in the water to be deep enough to drown a beaver, especially a large beaver. Once this beaver has hit this anchor, he is stopped. He cannot come back up the line. This is where the locking cable, or that drown lock, comes in. It cannot slide back up the cable. That beaver is forced to remain down here until he expires. A little bit on the anchor for this cable, this drowning cable set. It's got to be 30 pounds. A beaver, especially a large adult, can easily drag an anchor that's less than 30 pounds back to shore, and again, he'll be waiting up shore on morning with the anchor at his feet. A little bit on the anchor, there's another loop at the end of this drowning slide, much like where you would have had to stake it in on shore. This is where our 14 or 11 gauge wire comes in, and a good bit of lineman pliers. Just be sure to wrap it around whatever your anchor would be, whether it be a few sandbags, 30 pounds of cinder like I've got here, whatever it may be, make sure it's 30 pounds and 3 foot deep, and you'll have an effective drown slide beaver catch. Alright, here we have a good example of where the beavers are using the pond and continually coming out right here and kind of doing what I refer to as a crossover. What they're doing is they're continually using the same path, venturing up into the wood line behind us and foraging, cutting limbs, whatever they can find, whatever they like, and dragging them back into the pond. And they're using this. This is very heavily used, although there's these paths all up and down this edge of the pond. This is by far the most heavily used one. You can see they've got it really muddied up and really run down to dirt where their bellies are dragging as they're leaving the water. This is also a really similar sign to what you see, what they would call a dam crossover, where a beaver is going from one pond to another. Real similar looking sign. Great spot to do a trap site. Really high percentage area. They're using this area a lot just for as muddy as it is. Alright, so for this set we're going to use a drown set with this number 5 4-coil leg hold. The drown set's going to go good right here because, as you'll see, it's a really inconspicuous set. It's really going to be hidden away from the beaver, because otherwise if we try to put a counterbear or a snare here, it'd be a very difficult trap to hide, and there's a fine chance that the beavers would just stop using this area. So with the drown set, the most important thing is to make sure that you've got 3 feet of water to access to drown that beaver. So this anchor has to be able to get the 3 feet of water by the length of whatever your cable is. These cables come in a lot of different lengths, from 10 foot to 16 foot. You can customize them for as long as you want. Try not to go a whole lot longer than 15, 20 foot or so, because that's a long way for a beaver to go to find the end of that anchor to be drowned. The shorter that drown set is, the less chance you have of that beaver kinking up or not making it all the way to the bottom of to where the anchor is located. So to start off with, I'm first going to just place my trap up approximately, just to where I can watch it drag off the shore. Because what I want to do is walk my anchor out to 3 foot, but not so far out to where I might risk staking my cable in a spot that's too short for me to access. So I'm at about to my waist right here, which is about 3 foot for me. So right here is where I'm approximately gonna leave my anchor. Find the end of it here. Here we go. and I'll just leave it dropped. So I know my anchor is going to be here in about 3.5 foot, and I'm going to walk my cable back to the shore. And I'm doing this to kind of pinpoint my staking location. You got to be sure to stake the other end of your drown set. This is what I'm trying to estimate right now. So I know I've got to be staked. I did it just about perfect, just on the inside of this ledge here. Being that this ground is so hard right here, this 30-inch stake is not going to work for me this time. And I'm going to be able to get by with my shorter, well, that's probably about a 15 to 18-inch land stake. And this bottom is really rocky here. So once you get that stake in, it's sure enough going to hold. Now, as I staked that, I staked it at kind of an angle to where that beaver has to pull back on that entire stake to get any leverage. He can't just simply pull it straight out of the bank. Stake at an angle to where you have a lot more holding power with that stake. Alright, so now that we've got our cable set in, it's time to set the 4-coil trap. Sometimes you can set them down here next to the pond. This is just a little bit too slanted. It's going to be a difficult spot to set the trap in, so it's best off that I go ahead, and this is one advantage of the coil link, or the quick links. You can go ahead and detach your trap from that cable slide and take it up to higher ground for safer setting. Okay, so now that we're up on level ground, just up from where the slide is exiting the pond, we'll go ahead and quickly set our leg hold here. And I like to keep the pan up extremely high like that. That's not where you're going to want to be to set it, you know, once you leave the trap site, but it's going to keep it from going off accidentally by the time I get it attached back to my cable like I'm going to do right now. Okay, so now that we're back down at the stake site, we can go ahead and attach back our quick link here. And even though these gloves look bulky, they're still good for doing little tasks like this. You'd be surprised at what you're able to do with these gauntlet gloves on. So once that quick link is back securely attached, we're getting ready to set our trap here. Now this is not a leg hold you want sitting up here to where the beaver can see it. That's obviously going to be a problem. And usually at a pond side, you're not going to be able to conceal it in like you would on a coyote or a fox or raccoon set. So what we'll do is pull our cable tight here and have a look at bringing this cable slide right to the water's edge and the trap to the water's edge. I prefer my trap to be oriented to where when this beaver comes up and its front feet, this is going to be for a front foot catch, hits that pan and the dog flips and the trap disengages, there's no chance of that dog flipping the beaver's front foot out of that trapping area. So right now, if this trap opens, that dog flips this way, away from the beaver, and away from his foot and his belly and everything else to where he can be caught in that trap effectively. If it's this way, there's a good chance he could flip his foot up and out, and this way he could flip his foot away. There's a good chance, and I'm going to offset it a little bit here too, because if you can see, there's a lot of dry gravel right here, and the exit run where the beaver's leaving the pond is kind of coming up at an angle. So I don't want to set it straight in line with the run here because they're not approaching from that way. They're approaching more from this way, kind of down from more where the dam area is below us here. And it doesn't take a whole lot to bed this trap down. What you'll do, and most ponds have that nice soft bottom near the edge where there's some silt and everything else, it's just a matter of doing a wiggling motion like this until that trap is good and bedded and nice and firm. If there's a lot of slop in that trap when that beaver touches that pan, there's a good chance he'll come off that trap before it catches him. They do have pretty good reflexes, just like anything else that you would try to trap. So that's one tip for bedding that trap. And before I bed the trap, I go ahead and I lower that pan to where with just a little bit more of a touch on there, that trap will go off. Lower the jaw down and just slowly and carefully, keeping track of where your handles are on that pan or on that trap. Keeping your fingers away from the jaws, because at this point that trap is quite sensitive. Just go ahead and bed that trap to where it's good and firm, just like that. The next step is find your cable, pull it tight as you possibly can. That's a big trick to this whole operation, is making sure that your anchor is as tight as possible. If that anchor is not tight, that beaver cannot slide all the way down to the bottom. That's a tight anchor, and just to be sure, I like to do a few hops on it, bed it into the bottom sediment to where that beaver can't pull that anchor back to shore, and there it is. Now you've got some cable exposed here. A beaver's not going to particularly like that. You'll almost always have pond mud available to come back and cover that cable back up. And it's worth taking the time to do. Although a beaver can't see all that great, and they might well not be too upset by that, it's better than taking a chance. So I'm going to go ahead and just cover up that cable. Never hurts either to go ahead and brighten up that path a little bit. That might have some eye appeal to where that beaver wants to come by and make a visit. But that's your basic drown set. Now once this site goes ahead and settles down, when you come back to check it the next day, you'll either see the
populations of wildlife, and as our population of humans continue to grow along with this successful wildlife increases, we're running into more and more conflicts between the two. And there's a wide variety of ways to deal with that. We generally try to focus on controlling the damage as opposed to focus on controlling the critter itself. And that's what we'll talk a little bit about today, specifically with beaver. When landowners call us with the wildlife problem, one of the most frequent questions is how can we catch these animals to remove them from our property? The overriding thing is to remember is it's very important to match the trap to the animal and to run these traps early in the morning. For the restraining traps, again, remember these traps catch the animal alive and hold it until you get there. The next type we'll talk about are the body gripping traps. These traps actually clamp across the body and kill the animal. These are similar to the old rat trap design. The rat trap is the kill trap, snaps across the body. These traps are the same way. As you can notice, they're much bigger. This one is a 330, designed for beaver and otter size animals. Okay, we're going to make a beaver set here, but first we've got to set our trap. And remember, we discussed the several stage process involved. First, we have to compress these springs. And these traps can be kind of aggravating, as you'll tell as we go through this process. These springs are fairly strong, so one of the easy ways to do it is with a rope. Probably easiest. They make big metal setting tongs and some other techniques, but this is one that most landowners can do. You just take a rope, wrap it around your foot, and pull it through those eyelets once. Come back around, through it again, and then when you pull up, it'll compress these springs. You can bend down and set that safety hook. It's important when you're handling these, keep these safety hooks on, because that'll keep it from really hurting you if it sets off accidentally. Get our springs out to either side. Trigger's in the middle. And then compress the jaw. And to stabilize it, we're going to take some sticks and run through the springs and then bend them over in between the jaws, because these jaws are going to expand away from this stick. It'll allow the springs and the jaws to, but still stabilize the trap. So after we've got it in place, we'll run our sticks down in. We've got our trap in place now. We're going to put now our stabilizing stick's in place. Then the dog goes over the trigger.